When we last left May, she'd just met her prospective neighbors. The Gullivers at number 1 Gehenna Circle, Evelyn and Adam, who had a glut of children and a glut of everything. Cheryl Kingsley at number 2, the rich divorcee with an intense facelift. Jovial and messy Cornish and Linda Rust, number 3. Angry and aggressive Grill Reed and his mousy wife Beretta, number 5. Cocktail party hosts, the welcoming and wealth-laden Lucky and Forbes Mooney at number 6, and finally at number 7, Gehenna Circle, the gorgeous and flirty Kat and Derek Valentine. May seemed taken with this neighborly bunch, and Lucky assured her that the house is theirs if they want it. Let's see what happens next. Chapter 13. There's a slight catch. I knew it was too good to be true, I groaned, scratching at a mosquito bite on my wrist. It's not a big deal, just something to consider as we move forward. Just rip the Band-Aid off, I snapped, anxiety making me impatient. It's not a deal breaker, but... While Tom described a confusing detail of the purchase and sale agreement, my boss passed by the reference desk with a book cart. I smiled and nodded, attempting to appear as though my conversation was work-related. Lowering my voice, I said, "Explain it as if I'm not a real estate agent." Sorry. The gist of it is that if a homeowner dies, the house can be sold without restriction. Otherwise, the neighborhood association must be petitioned, and the owner needs the approval of all members before putting the house on the market. Hold on. Are you saying that if we buy the place and find out we absolutely hate it, we have to either die or ask our neighbors if we're allowed to move? I did my best to ignore the fact that Angela was eavesdropping on the call beside me. Pretty much. I don't know, Tom. This feels very beginning of a horror movie to me. He laughed. The way I understand it, it's like the association is similar to a co-op board. I've just never heard of such a thing outside of a condo building. I sighed. So do you think it's weird or not? He was silent for a long moment. Yeah, it's strange. And they want our answer by 5 o'clock or they're moving on to the other offer. Have you talked to Michelle? I asked, referring to his boss. What does she think about the whole thing? She thinks it's a great house. Okay, I sighed, noting that he hadn't really answered my question. Is that it? Well, the homeowner's insurance is going to come in higher than usual, but it's not too bad. Why? The house is in a floodplain. How is that possible? Looks like the cul-de-sac was originally wetlands. That lake back in the woods, the developer dammed it up and diverted the water around the neighborhood so it empties into that stream we crossed to get into it. No wonder the place smells so musty. Why in the world would someone go to the trouble of building a neighborhood in wetlands? Who knows? I could sense the impatience in his voice. I guess if there hasn't been a problem in all these years, then it's a non-issue. Homeowners insurance is just super conservative. Better to spend an extra couple of bucks to make sure we're covered in the unlikely event of a flood, right? Okay, but the neighborhood association thing, is that even legal? Tom drew in a breath. You know, if we hadn't had the chance to meet the neighbors, I'd have qualms about it, but they seem like reasonable people. More importantly, the house is exactly what we've been looking for, right? Why would we ever want to leave? Chapter 14. I woke up disoriented and thirsty, staring at the freshly painted ceiling, and was immediately gripped by the familiar anxiety rush of a hangover. I looked over at Tom sleeping soundly beside me and briefly considered waking him, but thought better of it. I was being silly. There was absolutely nothing to worry about. We were finally home. I padded into the bathroom, my head pounding. Over the summer, we'd made some improvements to the house, picking and choosing between the updates deemed absolutely necessary and those delayed by dwindling funds. Thoroughly renovating the primary bathroom had been an expensive but unavoidable decision. Neither of us could imagine showering in the cracked, moldy shower or using the old, rust-stained toilet. I washed my hands and splashed water on my face at our new vanity. The updates we'd made were cheap and simple. White subway tile for the shower walls, black and white hexagons for the floors. I was itching to do the same to the powder room on the first floor, but it had to wait. For the time being, I found tile paint and whitewashed the room. It gave it sort of an institutional vibe, but it still felt like an upgrade. I made no effort to be quiet as I dug through a moving box for sweatpants, but Tom remained dead to the world. After the previous day's move, I wasn't surprised. With so few belongings to transport, thanks to our destructive intruder, we didn't hire movers. Tom insisted all we needed was an hour and a couple trips to and from the U-Haul, but by the time we set out for Woodland Hills, we were ready to set fire to the truck rather than unload it. The furniture that survived the break-in survived because it was sturdy and heavy. It was also too big to fit into the building's coffin-sized elevator. Exhausted and ready to call it a day, we'd barely pulled into our driveway when Forbes and Derek appeared and started hauling our belongings into the house before we had the chance to protest. Kat handed me a holly bush as a housewarming gift and linked her arm through mine as we walked into my new home. Recognizing the spiky leaves, I told her that I was pretty sure the realtor had planted something similar near our front steps. "You can never go wrong with evergreen," Lucky pointed out approvingly. "And it's good luck," added Kat. "Since you already have some near the front door, put this by the patio. It'll look cute." Lucky gave us a gorgeous hurricane vase and a pillar candle. "There's some nice incense in this little bag," she added. "It's frankincense." "More good luck," enthused Kat. "Just be sure to open the windows and get a nice cross breeze going when you burn it," Lucky instructed. "Out with the old and with the new," added Kat. While the guys handled the boxes and furniture, the women pressed me to take them on a tour of the house. "It's smart to begin with a neutral base. You'll add texture and color over time," Lucky said of the bare walls. The truth was, I'd painted everything white on purpose. It felt so clean compared to the state in which we'd found the home. But seeing it through Lucky's eyes, I second-guessed the decision. "Get a load of this thing," Kat giggled, pulling down the oven door with a thunk. Embarrassed, I forced a smile. Our budget compelled us to keep the ancient wall oven and electric coil stove. The freshly painted cabinets only highlighted the sorry state of the old appliances. The tricky decisions regarding the kitchen had resulted in our only tense moment during the renovations. "That green Formica is at least 60 years old, May. It's going to drive us insane." "But we'll eventually gut the entire kitchen. I don't want to spend money on new countertops only to rip them out. It's wasteful," I'd argued. "They'll look even worse next to the new paint." "No worse than that mustard yellow fridge." "We'll choose something cheap," Tom reasoned. But I dug in. "I don't understand why you're so dead set on keeping these counters," he'd finally acquiesced in exasperation. "I don't want to keep them, Tom, but if we spend money replacing them, we'll have to wait to paint the exterior of the house." "But we have to look at these old things every day," he grumbled. "Yeah, and everyone in the neighborhood has to look at our house every day. We agreed the outside was a priority." It was true. We had agreed to fix up the exterior. It was also true that those god-awful chip counters would drive us mad. But the truest truth was that I didn't want our neighbors to think we didn't care about the way our house looked. Every house in the neighborhood was exactly the same. Same build, same paint. Ours would look downright shabby in comparison. "Are the appliances on back order?" asked Lucky. "How maddening." "We haven't found exactly what we want, so we're taking our time with the decision," I lied. The guys had the moving truck unloaded in no time, and before we knew it, we were lounging on Lucky's patio, enjoying a fresh batch of sangria. I was both grateful for and embarrassed by all that our new neighbors had done to welcome us. "The Gullivers wanted to be here," Lucky explained, "but they're at their Cape House this weekend." We transitioned from sangria to white wine and beer, and before we knew it, night had fallen and the tiki torches were lit. It may have just been the drinks mixing with the relief that the move was over, but it all felt so comfortable. It was as though we'd known these people forever. A sense of belonging fell over me, and I admit I was smitten with the place, with the people, with our place in it all. When the mosquitoes became too much to bear, we thanked everyone profusely, stumbled back to our house, and fell into our new bed, happy, exhausted, and more than a little drunk. I found myself hesitating to leave our bedroom. I blamed the nervousness on the hangover, which always carried a strong dose of anxiety, especially after a night spent socializing. I knew I'd be plagued with worries that I'd been too loud, shared too much, said the wrong thing all day long. It was why I didn't overindulge very often. Before stepping out into the hallway, I turned back and snuck a glance at Tom. I'm being ridiculous, I thought. Let him sleep. I was headed downstairs when I heard a soft click followed by a long creak and a gentle thump. I froze halfway down the stairs. It had definitely been that door at the base of the attic steps opening. I was sure of it. So sure of it that I felt no need to go investigate. Tom could have a look at it later. I continued down the stairs sideways so I wouldn't have to turn my back to the upper floor. And then I stepped into the kitchen. What the fuck? I whispered, taking in the chaos. The refrigerator door was wide open, and a moving box of pots and pans had tipped over, its contents scattered across the floor. Coffee covered half the countertop. I'd set the timer the night before so we could wake up to a fresh pot, but apparently I hadn't placed the pot beneath the maker. I didn't think I'd been that drunk. But where the hell was the pot? I crossed the kitchen, closed the door to the fridge, and grabbed a roll of paper towels to mop up the mess. My phone buzzed on the counter, making me jump. I picked it up and took a deep breath after looking at the screen. Hi, Mom. Are you in the house? Yep, Before I could elaborate, she cut in. Are you unpacked? We got here late afternoon, and the neighbors helped us unload the truck and then had us over for drinks. We'll get settled today. How are they? The neighbors? They're really nice. They all have young kids? No, I replied, feeling my walls go up. Huh. Big houses in the suburbs like that usually mean families. I only half listened, straightening the kitchen and searching for the coffee pot while she told me about her friends' kids' promising careers and their adorable grandchildren. Done with her signature passive-aggressive rundown, she said, Your dad says hello. I heard him muttering in the background. Are you on a well or do you have public water? My mom relayed the question. My father didn't like talking on the phone. Public, I think. That's a shame. I could sense she wanted me to ask her to explain, but I had no intention of doing so. I stared absently out the picture window above the sink, half listening to my mother pass along my father's mumblings. I was studying the overgrown raised bed garden in the far corner of the yard, wondering what vegetables to plant, when a noise behind me made the hair on my arm stand on end. I turned my head slowly, hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. Mom, I interrupted. I need to call you back. I hung up without waiting for her response. The garage door stood wide open. Tom? I said, praying he was awake and for some reason decided to sneak out to the garage without saying good morning. No answer. I forced myself forward and looked outside, shocked to see the coffee pot sitting dead center on the garage floor. A glance around the decrepit space told me that, aside from a pile of the previous owner's belongings, the garage was empty. I closed the door, slid the chain back into place, and turned both deadbolts, then hurried to check the front door and then the French doors in the living room. They were all locked, and so was the basement. What if he'd found us? The kitchen was a mess. It was what he'd done to our apartment, only now he had far fewer belongings to trash. I breathed slowly, willing myself to calm down. A moving box could fall off the counter. The fridge door and the coffee could have been wine-drunk-induced mistakes, but I'd just heard those locks turn by themselves and the chain slide out of place by itself before that door thudded open. Shit. What if it wasn't an intruder? My anxious thoughts were interrupted as a loud crack rang through the house. I screamed. Overhead, I heard Tom's feet hit the floor as he jumped out of bed. May, he yelled, where are you? I rushed to the foyer. I'm down here. What was that? He stood at the top of the stairs in his boxer shorts, his hair mussed from sleep. I don't know. I thought you'd slammed one of the bedroom doors, but they're all open. I took a few steps up the stairs, then stopped. What about the door to the attic? He moved down the hallway, disappearing from sight as he went to check. Yeah, it's closed. I heard it open when I was coming downstairs this morning. He stared down at me for a long moment before shaking his head. We must have a draft up here. Did you open a window? No. Chapter 15. I sat at the kitchen island as Tom refilled the coffee maker. We must have been more banged up than I thought last night, he laughed. We weren't blackout drunk, I countered. Even if we were, how does that explain the attic door? He sighed and leaned against the counter. There's got to be a loose floorboard on the stair that triggers... No one was anywhere near the stairs, I interrupted. It's an old house. Old wood contracts as the temperature drops at night. Mystery solved. What about the coffee pot? It's weird, I'll give you that, he acquiesced, but I'm pretty sure a ghost didn't move that coffee pot. I didn't say anything about a ghost. I slumped back in my chair, my headache growing with every second I went without caffeine. I was afraid someone had broken in. When I saw that mess, I thought... He came around the island and sat next to me. We've been living in a tiny apartment in the city. Everything here, the space, the sounds, even the air is different. It's going to take time to acclimate. He leaned in for a kiss, then went to a moving box and pulled out coffee mugs. I promise we're safe here. I just nodded, accepting a mug of coffee. "So, what should we tackle first?" he asked. "The kitchen." "Good call. After that, there's a pile of junk in the garage that old lady's movers left behind. I was thinking I'd haul it to the dump." "Let me go through it first," I told him. "There might be something worth salvaging." He began scrolling through his phone, and I sat, enjoying my coffee and the view from the picture window over the sink. It was really beautiful. The yard and the woods, the trees swaying in a gentle breeze. Tom had a point. It would take time to get used to our new home. What happened that morning was scary, but maybe it did just add up to anxiety and unfamiliar surroundings. Maybe. A couple minutes later, I was digging through a moving box when the doorbell rang. We looked at each other in surprise. "It's 8:30, Tom whispered. "Who the hell is that?" I started across the kitchen, but before I reached the foyer, the bell rang out again. I unlatched the deadbolt and opened the heavy front door. There stood Kat Valentine, in black lycra pants, a hot pink tank top, and a bouncy ponytail. "Good morning," she sang cheerily. But after taking in my clothes, she frowned. "I hope I'm not too early." I smiled, despite my confusion. "For what?" "Our walk," she giggled. "Don't tell me you forgot. We're doing the 2-mile loop out and around the pond." Behind me, Tom snorted. I struggled to keep the smile on my face. "I must have had more to drink than I thought last night," I admitted with an embarrassed laugh. "Oh my God, tell me about it," Kat said, all but bouncing into the house. "When the boys woke me up at 5, I thought I might throw up." "You've been up since 5 o'clock?" Tom said incredulously. "Do you want a cup of coffee?" She swatted his arm affectionately. "I'm way ahead of you. I've already had 3. What I need is to sweat out all that booze." She put her hands on her hips and stood straight, the picture of health. "Give me 2 seconds, and I'll be ready to go." I took the stairs 2 at a time, trying to remember which box held my sneakers. Chapter 16. Behind each house in the cul-de-sac was a footpath that led into the woods and connected to the main trail, a sort of semicircle around the neighborhood. At the trail's apex was another path that connected to a loop around Acheron Lake. "Where's your new holly bush?" Kat asked after we'd stepped out onto the back patio. "Oh, it's in the kitchen. I was planning to plant it today," I fibbed. "The sooner you get her in the ground, the better. They don't like being cooped up." Her tone was light, but I sensed something beneath it. I hoped she didn't think I was being rude, but she'd only given me the bush the previous afternoon. It wasn't even 9 a.m. She couldn't have expected me to plant it already, could she? "You might want to pull your socks over your leggings," she advised before we entered the woods. "The ticks back here are brutal." Unfortunately, I was wearing ankle socks, but I did my best to hike them up as I followed her into the woods on a footpath nearly hidden by overgrown vegetation. We walked single file for a couple minutes before we made it to the main trail. I'm not proud to admit it, but as I stumbled along behind Kat, it was impossible not to notice her perfect figure, and I found myself thinking absolutely hateful thoughts about myself and my own body. I pulled my mind back to the present when we made it out to the main trail, where we could comfortably stand shoulder to shoulder. "Luckily, the mosquitoes don't seem to like the woods, but keep an eye out for poison ivy," she warned, "and poison oak, for that matter. It's best to always keep to the trail back here." I had no idea what either of those plants looked like, but that little footpath from our backyard had been so overgrown, I worried that I had already brushed up against something poisonous. After turning onto another trail, which Kat explained would lead us to the lake, we continued on for another 15 minutes, chatting about her recent basement renovation, an upcoming book club meeting at her house she insisted I attend, and some new bushes she'd recently planted in their backyard that were already dying. "I was thinking about cleaning out those old raised beds in our backyard to get them ready for next spring," I said, avoiding a large tree root. "For a flower garden?" "I was thinking vegetables." "Oh, shit, no, you can't. Mrs. Talbot's old cat used it as a litter box before the coyotes got her. I bet the Russ cat does the same thing. Grill is always complaining about Queenie getting into their yard." "Oh," I said, disappointed. "Gross. Thank God I mentioned it." "Unless you really know what you're doing, you should be careful gardening here, especially anywhere near the woods. I'll put you in touch with our landscapers." "Why?" "Oh, they're really good. I wouldn't suggest them if I didn't think—" "No, I mean, why should I be careful gardening near the woods?" "Oh," Kat let out a laugh that sounded forced. "You know, you have to watch out for ticks and itchy poisonous stuff, and I'm pretty sure there's oleander around here too." "Good to know," I said, though I hadn't planned on ingesting any strange plants that I happened upon in my backyard. "Look!" Kat exclaimed. "Here we are." Ahead of us loomed an ancient dam, braced in several places by equally ancient-looking wood beams. The half-moon-shaped brick wall, about 15 feet across and 6 feet tall at its highest point, diverted the water's natural exit, creating streams to either side of the dam. "That looks awfully precarious," I commented, staring out at the large body of water behind it. "For sure," she agreed, taking the path on the left and cautioning me to watch my step. Soon we came to a rickety wooden bridge over a trickling brook. We climbed up 3 steps and took a moment to watch the water flow beneath us. "These streams overflow when we have a bad storm," Kat explained. "It takes forever for the trail to dry out." I glanced back at the ancient wood beams, thinking of our expensive floodplain insurance as we continued around the lake. The forest beside us was a dense mix of evergreens and oaks, the ground beneath carpeted with fern and a tangle of underbrush. It was beautiful, but wild, and the further we went, the more unsettled I felt. I tried to pay attention to Kat's friendly chatter, but we'd been walking for at least 25, maybe 30 minutes, and I felt very far away from the neighborhood. Too far. Finally, we came to the bridge on the other side of the pond. It was in worse shape than its twin. Kat warned me to step over 2 rotten boards in the middle, but I wasn't sure we had any business on any part of the structure. We were finally back on the connector path when we heard a commotion up ahead. A huge, blonde, curly-haired goldendoodle appeared ahead of us on the trail, followed by children's voices screaming, "Joy, come back!" Kat knelt down with open arms, and the goofy dog ran straight to her. Seconds later, 2 adorable little boys toddled down the path to meet us. The dog danced around and jumped up on me in a frenzy of happiness. "Joy, off!" Kat demanded. I scratched the dog's curly head as she sat at my feet, tail swishing. Derek sauntered along behind his boys. "What did you think of the trail?" he asked, slipping an arm around Kat's waist and kissing her on the temple. "It's really pretty," I replied. The boys began begging their mother to do another loop with them. Kat offered an apologetic look. "Do you think you can find your way back from here? You just go to the end of this path, turn right, and the entrance to your footpath is your next left." "Even if you go too far, just take any of the footpaths. They'll dump you out into someone's backyard," Derek added. "You can't screw it up." Chapter 17. The boys were already sprinting away with the dog as I waved goodbye. I began to worry the second I lost sight of them. The woods were too quiet. I realized I didn't hear any birds, and that pulled forth a vague memory from some nature program, or maybe a TikTok, about birds falling silent when predators were nearby. I wanted to run after them, even if it meant walking all the way around the lake again. I found myself unable to move until I heard something rustle the brush alongside the path. I scurried forward and took a right, as Kat instructed, but for the life of me, I couldn't find the path to my yard. In fact, I couldn't find a path to anyone's backyard. I walked what I knew was too far, then doubled back, and doubled back again. I forced myself to stop and take several deep breaths to chase away building panic. "Stop freaking out, walk slowly, pay attention," I told myself. But the ground beside the path was completely obscured by ferns and scruffy-looking bushes, and Kat's warning about ticks and itchy plants kept me from getting too close. Worse still, the mosquitoes had decided they actually didn't mind the woods after all, and they really liked me. Finally, I spotted a patch of dirt and stepped through the underbrush, pricker bushes pulling at my thin pants. I was definitely on a path, but it was so overgrown I kept having to bend over and brush aside greenery to be sure. My hands and arms were a mess of scratches and bites by the time I popped out of the woods into a yard. "Well, look who's here," Cheryl Kingsley drawled from a lounge chair surrounded by tiki torches. She wore a remarkably tiny, hot pink bikini, and her skin glistened with oil. "I'm so sorry. I got turned around on the path and—" Cheryl sat up quickly, pushing her sunglasses to the top of her head. "You didn't go in there alone, did you?" "No. Kat took me on a walk around the lake, but then we ran into her family, and I thought I knew what I was doing, but I managed to get lost." "Kat knows better than to let anyone go off alone in there unless they—" Cheryl trailed off and scanned the tree line. "She shouldn't have left you by yourself." "It's not her fault, really. I just lost my sense of direction." "Don't do it again. You hear me?" I nodded, chastened. "Wait here," she instructed, throwing her long, sinewy legs over the side of the lounge chair. I considered making a run for it as I watched her toddle into the house on high-heeled flip-flops, but knew I shouldn't. I took a few steps toward the patio and stopped short when I heard loud rustling behind me. I wondered for a moment if I'd see Kat and her family emerge from the woods, but no one was there. I stared at the overgrown trail entrance and noticed something on one of the trees. A circle with a dot at its center had been drawn in chalk on the bark. "Here." Cheryl's voice made me jump. I spun around and saw she was holding out a glittering gold gift bag. Her gaze slid to the chalk circle, then back to me. "It's a housewarming gift," she said. "I intended to drop it off, but here you are." "Thank you," I replied, accepting the bag. "It's a frankincense candle and a little pot of 4-leaf clover. For luck," she stated matter-of-factly. "Thank you. That's so thoughtful." "It's nothing. How's the house?" I felt as though she was studying me for some sort of reaction. "It's great," I said as convincingly as I could. "You'll invite me for a tour soon, I'm sure." "Of course, once we get settled and—" "All right then, I won't keep you." She brought her sunglasses down over her eyes and stretched her thin body back out onto the lawn chair. "Only a few warm days left before the cold comes." Dismissed, I made an awkward retreat around the side of her house to the road. I could have kissed the asphalt-covered street once I'd made it down the driveway. That massive island of trees at the center of the cul-de-sac looked downright ominous after all that time spent in the woods. I stayed as far from it as I could, hugging the edges of Cheryl's and then the Rust's lawns until I made it to my own yard. Rushing inside, I went straight to the kitchen sink and chugged down a coffee mug full of water, then glanced at my watch. It was after 11 o'clock. I'd been gone for over 2 hours, which was impossible. An hour, maybe, but there was no way I'd been in the woods that long. I refilled the mug with water, still desperately thirsty, when I heard Tom calling my name from the living room. "Yeah," I called back before chugging half the cup. "In here," he replied quietly. "I got lost in the woods," I said, moving through the back hall. "Somehow I ended up in Cheryl Kingsley's—" I trailed off when I realized I was talking to an empty room. "Tom?" Retracing my steps, I wondered if he'd gone in the opposite direction through the foyer to meet me in the kitchen, but there was still no sign of him. Uneasy, I completed the circuit of the first floor and stood at the base of the stairs. "Tom!" I yelled at the top of my voice. "Yeah." His voice sounded far away. Reluctantly, I walked toward the back hall and opened the basement door. "Hello?" I called out, unsure. He appeared at the bottom of the stairs. "Were you in the family room just now?" "Nope. I thought I heard you." "Been down here for a while. How was the walk?" "It's really nice. I got a little turned around on my way back, though." "Why wasn't Kat with you?" "Her family showed up and wanted her to do the loop with them," I explained, walking down to meet him. He gave me a kiss and said, "I'll go for a run this afternoon. Check it out." "Cheryl said we shouldn't go on the trail alone." Tom rolled his eyes. "These people act like the coyotes are going to murder us all." "Just be careful," I cautioned. "What are you up to down here?" "Setting up the dehumidifiers. I think this might make a good workspace." I laughed before realizing he was serious. "Are you crazy?" "Once we get these things running, the musty smell will go away. It'll be a good place to keep my tools." I was about to ask what tools, but thought better of it. Instead, I scanned the dank, cavernous space. Why not the garage? "Unsecure," he said absently, making me wonder if he was as worried about a break-in as I was. "Hey, did you notice Forbes or Derek coming down here when they were helping us unpack?" "I don't think so. Why?" "Look." He pointed down at the keystone beneath the stairs. "Oh, I forgot about that thing." Tom scuffed his foot along beside the stone. "There was a circle of salt around it," he said angrily. "Do you know anything about that?" "No," I replied, my chest tightening. "Are you sure it was salt?" "Yeah, I tasted it." "Gross," I chided, laughing nervously. He looked up at me. It was a circle, with a little pile in the center, too. "It's that symbol again, the one you wiped off the fireplace. And you know what? I just saw the same symbol on a tree in Cheryl Kingsley's yard." Tom considered for a long moment before responding. "Let's make sure we keep all the doors locked." "Do you think someone broke in here?" I nearly shrieked. "No, we probably just didn't notice it yesterday. Come on." He put a hand on my lower back and guided me toward the stairs. Why don't we go out for lunch? There's a good deli by my office. Chapter 18. I can't get over how different it looks. I'm dying to see it in person, Angela gushed, referring to the photos I'd texted her. As soon as I get my act together, we'll have you and Sarah out for dinner. So do you have your names on the wait list for the country club yet? No, I laughed, not yet. How are the neighbors? They've been really nice, actually. Some are a little quirky, but there are a couple women I could see myself being close with. Angela gasped. What have you done with my friend? Stop, I laughed. You don't make friends. You hole up at home with a book. I know, but I feel like I should at least try to put myself out there. Just be careful, she warned. You've gotten yourself into a master's-level social scene. I can manage. I'm just giving you a hard time. Wait, you won't believe what happened the other day. But my attention was pulled away when the doorbell rang. Shoot, I'm sorry, I've got to go. I apologized. The electrician's here. I'll call you later this week. We rang off, and I opened the front door to Ben Fentz, an electrician recommended by Lucky. I'd asked him to install new fixtures in the entryway and upstairs hall. After explaining what I wanted, I got out of his way and decided to try assembling a cheap set of drawers I bought to put in our bedroom closet for extra storage. I'd only managed to pull the parts from the box when I heard Ben calling my name from downstairs. I poked my head out of the bedroom, and he asked if he could show me something in the basement. We got a problem here, he declared, pointing to a rusty gray metal box attached to our basement wall. What's wrong with it? You need to upgrade this electrical box. It's dramatically undersized for a house this big. I have no clue how it made it this far, but there's no way that thing will pass inspection. What inspection? I gotta file for a permit before I can deal with the mess up there, he replied, as though we'd just finished discussing the point. The town will send out an inspector when I'm done, and I'm telling you, there's no way they'll pass you with the box in its current condition. Wait, what mess? I thought we were just replacing light fixtures. Ben suddenly looked nervous, as though he hated to break very bad news. I took down the fixture in the hallway like you asked, and I don't know who wired this place, but it's like nothing I've ever seen. We did notice that the wall switches are sort of haphazard, I conceded. That's just the start of it. I can't in good conscience leave things the way they are, and I can't do the work necessary to fix it without pulling a permit. I swore under my breath. Do you think the wiring is bad throughout the whole house? He made a non-committal noise, and I realized that was exactly what he suspected. Okay, we'll just have to do what we have to do, right? It's an old house. That's for sure. I pointed to the electrical box. What exactly does switching this thing out, or whatever, entail? He rattled off a bunch of technical mumbo-jumbo. I attempted to absorb the details, but decided our time would be better spent simply getting to the heart of the matter. What will all of that cost? Updated wiring and a new electrical box? He stared up at the ceiling, apparently calculating figures in his mind. I watched him, waiting for an answer, all the while thinking of the rug I'd hoped to order for the living room. Please say less than $500, I mantraed slightly. Please say less than $500. All in all, he said finally, sorting out the wiring, upgrading the box, I guess it'll run you upwards of $6,000, depending on whether or not I run into anything unexpected. I was so stunned that the image of the rug fell right out of my head, only to be replaced by panicked thoughts about a deposit I'd just put down to have the driveway repaved. Words escaped me. Ben's face softened. You want me to call your husband and go over it with him? Though I knew he was trying to be helpful, he chose the wrong way to go about it. I'm managing the renovations in this house, so no, I don't want you to call my husband. You just need to give me a minute to process this. $6,000 is a lot of money. Yeah, and that's only if I don't find anything else. I held up a hand. I get it. If this is the situation, then we just have to deal with it. But Ben, please, don't find anything else wrong with this house, okay? Okay, he replied doubtfully. I turned to walk back upstairs. Oh, and Mrs. Kane. I turned back to face him, bracing myself for more bad news. I might have to make a bit of a racket. Is that okay? I don't want to disturb your grandmother. Who? The older lady in the living room. I shook my head. There's no old woman here. At least there shouldn't be. This fucking neighborhood, I heard him mutter as I ran upstairs. Chapter 19. I rode my bike 6 miles into town and could barely walk by the time I got to Tom's office. He hadn't responded to my text, so I was beyond relieved when I saw our car parked in front of the Black Oak Realty office. The little converted cottage was surrounded by hydrangea bushes whose white blooms were just beginning to rust. I walked/stumbled up the front door on unsteady legs, and as a bell tingled overhead announcing my arrival, it suddenly occurred to me how I must have looked. A young man rose from behind a large antique desk in what I guess was originally the living room. "Good morning," he said pleasantly, his eyes sweeping over me. I was still wearing what I'd slept in, black leggings and one of Tom's old button-down shirts. "How may I help you?" "Hi, I'm May Kane, Tom's wife. I was wondering if—" "Hi, sure, he's back at his desk. I'm Jack," he said, extending a hand. "It's so nice to finally meet you." I smiled and shook his hand, then attempted to smooth my ponytail. My bangs were clipped back with a bobby pin, and I hadn't even washed my face that morning. This was not the first impression I wanted to make on Tom's coworkers, but it was too late to turn back. Besides, I needed him to drive me home. There was no way I'd make it back to the cul-de-sac on that damn bike. I followed Jack down a short hallway to the back of the house, which opened to a large room filled with several desks. Tom was at the very far back corner. A woman sat across from him, laughing. They were obviously in the middle of a conversation. "Oh," I said in a low voice, "I don't want to interrupt him when he's with a client. I can wait." "That's Robbie," Jack explained. "She's one of our agents." "She?" I thought. "Robbie is a she?" It took my mind too many beats to catch up, and I had to rearrange my expression when I caught Jack staring at me. "May," Tom called out, coming from behind his desk. He was smiling, but there was a question in his eyes. "This is a nice surprise. How'd you get into town?" I could feel Robbie's eyes on me, checking me out with not-so-subtle curiosity. "I rode my bike," I replied, feeling utterly absurd. "I thought I could treat you to lunch." "I just ate," he said, glancing at his watch. "Oh, well, how about a coffee instead?" he suggested. "This is Robbie. She's been incredibly patient showing me the ropes here." She unfolded her long legs and stood, smiling widely. "I've heard so much about you. Thrilled to finally meet you," she gushed. "Tom is a real breath of fresh air. We're lucky to have him." "Is that so?" I thought. "It's nice to meet you, too," I replied, feeling like a frumpy loser, the bored, unemployed stay-at-home wife showing up to the office to bug her husband. "Would either of you like coffee? My treat," Tom asked, pushing his chair beneath his desk and clicking through something on his computer screen before coming to stand beside me. His coworkers declined the offer, and by the time we made it out of the building, I was about ready to burst. When we were finally outside, he said, "Is everything all right?" "No," I blurted. "Our fucking house is haunted." Chapter 20. "The guy probably saw something out of the corner of his eye and assumed it was a person," Tom reasoned, loading my bike into the back of our Jeep. "It wasn't like that. He described her in detail. She had on jeans and a yellow cardigan, and he said she had really curly, short gray hair." Tom blew out a breath as he closed the hatchback. "The cafe is just 2 blocks away. Let's walk over, and then I'll run you back home." "I am not going back there alone," I insisted. He took my hand as we headed down the sidewalk. "There has to be some other explanation." "Said every man in a horror movie since the beginning of time," I muttered. "What's that supposed to mean?" "We've made it to the part of the story where you gaslight me into thinking I'm overreacting, and that there's a perfectly reasonable, non-paranormal explanation why our electrician saw an old woman in our house." "Paranormal, huh?" Tom said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I laughed despite myself. "What if it was an actual person? Maybe some confused elderly woman wandered inside." "You think that's more likely?" I dragged Ben upstairs to look through the entire house with me, including the attic, and I could tell he was just as freaked out as I was. Tom held the door open to Roasted, and we took our place at the end of a short line. "I think it's Olive Talbot." "May," he warned, "lower your voice." I looked around us dramatically. "Who in the world do you think is listening to us?" "Just take it down a notch, okay?" "Fine, but listen, it makes perfect sense. He described an old woman, right? An old woman died on our property." "Next." The woman behind the counter stared at us impatiently. We carried our coffees and one blueberry muffin outside and sat on a bench in front of the cafe. "I don't know how you can be so calm about all this," I seethed, before biting into the muffin. I just don't want to get worked up over a misunderstanding. You'd believe it if you'd been there. I washed the muffin down with a sip of coffee. Ben even said something like, "This fucking neighborhood." What did he mean by that? Isn't it obvious? Did he get the lights installed at least? No, he said the job requires another set of hands, so he's bringing a buddy with him tomorrow. But I get the feeling it's really because he doesn't want to work alone in our basement. Tom dropped his chin to his chest in frustration. Come on. Connect the dots. We have doors that open by themselves. The kitchen was trashed our first night in the house. And now this. I don't know. There's something about the neighbors. They're like holding something back. I can just feel it. And those chalk marks. Hold on, Tom interrupted. Pump the brakes for a second. You've been under a lot of stress, and I think that break-in... Don't do that. I'm just suggesting that you consider some of this might be brought on by post-traumatic stress. You think the electrician saw an old woman in our house because of my PTSD? Tom pursed his lips and just stared out at the cars passing by on the street before us. Just at least admit that the house is creepy, I said finally. It's been a little strange, he conceded. But once we get furniture and hang some stuff on the walls, it'll feel totally different. Trust me. I popped the last bite of muffin into my mouth to keep myself from pointing out that we didn't have the money for that. Look, I have to get back to the office. I really don't want to go back to the house alone, I admitted, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Why don't you go check out the library? In other words, get off my ass and go get a job? Well, if I do that, then who will be there to meet all the workers at our house so they can hallucinate seeing old women? You know that's not what I mean. I'd ask you to come back and hang at the office with me, but I have 3 showings this afternoon. With Robbie? I snipped. He blinked in confusion. It just seems a little funny that you never mentioned that Robbie is a woman. Tom stared at me for a long moment, then laughed. You mean Roberta? It honestly never occurred to me to bring it up. Sure. He sighed in frustration. Look, everything's going to be fine. Whatever's going on at the house, I'm sure. There has to be a reasonable explanation, I finished, mimicking his voice. He smiled. Well, there has to be, right? We can't live in a haunted house. So you believe me? He scrubbed his face with his hands. Yeah, there's something weird going on, but I'm sure we can find a way to fix it. How? We'll figure it out. Come on, let's get you to the library. That's okay, I said. I'll walk. It's just a couple of blocks, right? You sure? I nodded. I'm sorry, but I have to get back, he said, standing. I'll pick you up over there at 5. We'll grab dinner on the way home. Chapter 21. I attempted to kill time by scrolling through social media, but instead of the distraction I wanted, I found myself bombarded with pictures of either my old grad school classmates showing off their libraries or friends' pregnancy announcements and baby photos. Agitated, I left the bench and walked the short distance to the town library. Housed in an old stone building overlooking the town green, its interior had obviously been updated in recent years. There's a children's room, colorful and loud, jam-packed with preschool-aged children, a computer lab, and a cozy sitting area with leather chairs and small tables nestled in the periodicals section. Climbing to the second floor, I found stacks upon stacks of beautifully organized, ever-reliable books. I chose an old favorite Perrault and snagged the latest in Julie Mulhern's Country Club murder series. Back on the first floor, I settled into a comfortable chair that allowed a clear view of the reference desk. A woman with tortoise-shell glasses and a short gray bob checked books in and out alongside a 20-something with pink-streaked blonde hair. I watched in admiration as the younger woman demonstrated endless patience with a man loudly complaining about the noise coming from the children's room. I allowed myself to imagine what it would be like to be on the other side of that desk, developing programming for the community, fielding questions and offering reader's advisory, maybe even hosting a mystery book club after hours. Of course, I'd peeked at their job listings online, but the only opening I found was for a computer technician. It wasn't the right time, anyway, with all the work left at the house, and besides, we only had the one car, but maybe Tom and I could work out a schedule until we could afford a second one. A job could pay for the furniture we wanted. A job would keep me out of the house. I gathered up my books and approached the front desk before I could talk myself out of it. Good afternoon. The gray-haired librarian trilled. Hi. I held up the books in my hand. I just moved to town, and I'd like to apply for a library card. Welcome. She produced an application from beneath the desk. I'm Verity. Whereabouts did you land? I told her as I filled out the short form. The eerie old wood, she intoned. Startled, I looked up at her. Excuse me? Oh, I'm just being silly. I've lived in this gossipy little town for too long. She took the form from me and asked, How are you settling in? So far, so good. My eyes fell on a newspaper perched at the edge of the desk, and an idea came to me. Will my library card grant access to your databases? The woman put a hand to her chest dramatically. The only people I can ever convince to use the databases are the middle school kids during report season, and even then, I practically have to beg. I laughed. I'm actually a librarian. Why didn't you say so? Jenny, come over here and meet this woman. She's one of us. The librarian with the pink hair rushed over to introduce herself. Where do you work? She asked. I was in Boston, but I took some time off to get settled in our new house, I explained. Actually, I was wondering if there are any upcoming openings here. Verity rested a hand on her chin. There aren't any paid openings right now, but would you be open to a volunteer job to get your foot in the door? She glanced at her coworker. How about the pit of despair? Jenny scoffed. We couldn't do that to her. I'm up for anything, I insisted. As you wish, Verity said with a twinkle in her eye. We have a small local collection shoved in a far corner on the second floor. It's just a bunch of newspapers, few books by local authors, some maps. Honestly, it should be sent to the Historical Society, but our board won't let it go. We took a stab at organizing it a couple years ago, but lost steam. Then last month, one of the library trustees got a bee in her bonnet about organizing it. Utter waste of time, Jenny muttered. Maybe, maybe not. You never know what might be in there, Verity pointed out. But if someone were to volunteer to organize the junk, better yet, if that someone happened to have a degree in library science, they might be first in line for a reference position when Jeremy moves to Vermont. Jeremy's moving? Jenny whispered. Verity winked. You didn't hear that from me, but he's planning on proposing to that mousy girlfriend with the patchwork clogs. She won't move down here? Not a chance. Anyway, I don't know if you would be interested in a volunteer gig, but in the off chance you'd be willing to sort through a bunch of... I would kill to get my hands on that collection, I said, without another thought. Tell you what, Virginia held up my library card application. We've got your contact information. I'll talk to the director and see if we can get approval for a new volunteer. I'm sure she'll see it as a win-win. She can report back to the trustee that she's on top of this little archive, and you will get a chance to hop right to the front of the line by wowing us with all your organizational skills. I don't even know what to say. Thank you. Virginia waved away my gratitude. Let's hook you up with that library card so we can get you into those databases. Chapter 22. The market is on fire for this time of year, Tom said between bites of sesame chicken. I never had this many listings in the city, not even close. Congratulations, I told him, holding out my wine glass to cheers. We were at our kitchen island. I hadn't felt comfortable going to any of the restaurants in town dressed as I was, so we opted for Chinese takeout. The house felt fine, normal. The morning, with all its drama, seemed so far away. Once I get a couple of these houses sold, we'll finally be able to outfit this place. I was actually thinking about a second car. Chewing a large bite of food, Tom tilted his head in question. I asked if there are any openings at the library today, and there isn't anything right now, but there might be a volunteer position. It would get my foot in the door. I thought you weren't going to look for work until we were done with all the work on the house. Sure, but this wouldn't be a huge commitment. It's just sorting some local newspapers and books. It'd be a good way to... I don't know. Honestly, I need to get out of this house. Just because of what happened with the electrician? That, I began, trying to keep the impatience out of my voice. Why did I all of a sudden feel as if I were asking permission to get a job? And I'm bored. I can't just sit around all day. Tom finished his wine before responding. I thought maybe we might give the whole having kids thing a go. What? Wait, no. What? I know we wanted to wait until we felt more financially secure, but I'm serious, May. If even half the houses I have under contract sell, we won't have to worry about a thing. It's not just about the money. I'm not ready, and I definitely can't imagine bringing a baby into this house anytime soon. What's that supposed to mean? I know you want to just ignore how creepy this place is, but I can't do that. Look, I get that it's an adjustment leaving the city and your job. I just thought, we have all this space and I don't want to be here alone now. Do you think being stuck out here with a baby will make me less freaked out? We stared at each other for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. You're right, he said finally. I'm jumping the gun. I should have felt relieved, but the fact that he'd even brought up the idea of kids left me shaken. We weren't ready. I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure I'd ever be, and he knew that. I think it's great you're going to volunteer at the library, he said in a chillingly neutral tone. Do you think you could wait a month or two for a car? The volunteer gig isn't even a sure thing. It's just a possibility. He stood and dumped the takeout containers into the garbage. I'm going to go down and set up that workbench. A few hours of painfully cordial silence later, I dropped my book into my lap as I watched Tom crawl into bed. Truce? I offered. He leaned over for a kiss and agreed. Truce, before opening his laptop. I want to tell you something, but I don't want you to get upset. Okay, he replied slowly. I took a deep breath and blurted, I found an article about Olive Talbot's death at the library. He looked up from his computer and peered at me over his reading glasses. I wanted to know what happened to the woman who lived in this house. So what did happen? Hypothermia. Tom's brow furrowed. Really? She was found on the patio by a neighbor, I said significantly. Weird. I wonder who found her. It didn't say. There was an investigation because she was outside overnight this past February, but she wasn't locked out. The doors were all unlocked. Yeesh, maybe she fell asleep out there. Doubtful. Not if she was drinking, Tom pointed out. I guess. Or maybe she did it on purpose. I imagined the older woman sitting on our patio in the freezing cold, waiting for death to come. That's awful. Tom made a sound of agreement and turned back to his computer screen. There was a photo of her. His eyebrows went up as he looked back at me. She had short, curly hair. The photo was black and white, but I'm pretty certain her hair was gray. Most old people have gray hair. Come on! He pursed his lips. I found an article about the cul-de-sac, too. I shifted to face him. String of tragedies rock local neighborhood. That got his attention. What? That was the title of the article. Olive's death isn't the only awful thing to happen here. Over the years, there have been a lot of accidents and, bad luck. There was a fire that disfigured a woman and killed the family dog in Cheryl Kingsley's house. Then the guy that used to live in Lucky and Forbes's place was arrested for some major tax fraud thing. And this is the worst one. There was a murder-suicide at Kat and Derek's house 25 years ago. Apparently, the guy found out his wife was cheating, stabbed her to death, and then hung himself. They had 2 little kids. Where did you find all this? An old article in the local paper in one of the library databases. It's strange, Tom. And the other thing is that when I told the librarian where we live, she called our neighborhood the Eerie Old Wood. He closed his laptop with a little too much force. May, you have to admit that's a lot of bad luck for one tiny neighborhood, and I just have this feeling that there's more. I bet if you looked up any neighborhood in this country and you dug enough, you could find tons of bad stuff. But I didn't have to dig at all, I argued. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Do you want something to be wrong with this place? What's that supposed to mean? I don't know. This is all starting to sound like one of your books. Forget it. I switched off my bedside lamp and turned away from him. He sighed and put his laptop on the floor. I'm sorry, he whispered, snuggling in behind me. I'm trying to have an open mind about this, but I think maybe you're still dealing with some anxiety about what happened in the city. A woman dying of hypothermia on our patio and multiple deaths in our neighborhood have absolutely nothing to do with me worrying about a break-in. I know, but if you go searching for the bad, you're going to find it. Let's try and look at the good, okay? I'm on track for an amazing end of year. We'll get some nice furniture, fix up the kitchen. This place will feel completely different. You'll see. I clenched my jaw to bite back a response. Chapter 23. We'll be here all day, Ben explained. Me and Sam will start in the basement, and Chris will be upstairs sorting out the wiring. I'll do my best to stay out of your way, I replied, stifling a yawn. I'd been up since 4, startled awake by Tom shoving a towel beneath our bedroom door. Scratching on the ceiling woke him up. He'd gone up to the attic to see if he could determine its source and hadn't seen any rodents, but when he was headed back to our bedroom, he heard something on the attic stairs. It growled. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Oh my God, what the hell was it, a raccoon? I don't think raccoons growl. Then what was it? I'll call an exterminator first thing. He'd flopped back into bed and promptly fell back to sleep, but I couldn't. I tried to read for a while, then finally shook him awake at 6 and demanded he check the hallway before I went down for coffee. We have an exterminator coming around 10, I told Ben. No problem. What have you got, mice? Sam asked. I don't think so. Whatever it is growls. The 3 men exchanged knowing looks. Well, Ben announced, we'll keep an eye out. I refilled my coffee mug and sat at the island with my laptop. I really had nothing to do, but I felt funny lounging with a book when there were 3 people hard at work in the house. I clicked around online, then checked the time and decided to call Angela to catch up. I knew she was an early riser, and the library didn't open until 10. You're psychic, she said, answering on the first ring. I was just talking about you last night. Oh? I was out for drinks with my old college roommate, and I'd completely forgotten this, but she grew up in Woodland Hills. No way. Yeah, she was just back there for a friend's funeral. Oh, no. Sad, right? Angela agreed. Anyway, I told her where you live, and she called it the eerie old woods. You're kidding me. Angela laughed. No, I guess when she was little, they used to ride their bikes out there and dare each other to walk out on some lake. When I didn't reply, Angela said, What's up? Nothing, it's just, this place is actually kind of creepy. Creepy how? The story spilled out of me. The first morning, the walk with Kat and getting turned around in the woods, the old lady ghost and the articles from the library, Tom hearing the growling. Angela listened with minimal interruption, and when I'd finished, she fell into an uncharacteristic silence. Well, I pressed, please don't tell me that I'm overreacting. No, she said quickly. I'm just processing. What does Tom think? He thinks I'm overreacting because I'm still PTSDing over the apartment break-in. Angela made a noise of disbelief. Right. Okay, look, I don't think you're overreacting at all. Thank you, I said, feeling utterly relieved. I gotta go, or I'm gonna be late, but I'll text my friend and see what else she can tell me about the neighborhood. I'll let you know what she says. I didn't want to let her go, but rang off with the assurance that she'd get back to me as soon as she could. Antsy, I stood and washed out my coffee mug and wandered into the family room. A couch was on order, due to arrive the following week. Curtain rods leaned against the front wall. I could try to hang them, but the project felt too intimidating, so I continued on to the foyer and then back to the kitchen. I stood there, listening to the small knocks and bangs from the electricians, wondering what to do with myself, when my gaze landed on the garage door. I remembered the pile of Olive Talbot's belongings. It was as good a time as ever to sort through them. There was a chill in the damp garage, so I grabbed a sweatshirt before digging into the large pile of what appeared to be mostly junk. I dragged a couple of squat aluminum beach chairs next to the kitchen door, planning to carry them out to the patio. They were quite warm, but something was better than nothing until we could afford outdoor furniture. I moved assorted paint cans, beat-up holiday decorations, and other junk to the front of the garage, intending to haul the pile to the dump that weekend, and then I tackled the boxes. There were 9 of them, the standard medium-sized square ones you buy from U-Haul. The first box was full of mismatched towels. They weren't in great shape, but I left them in the box and dragged it beside the chairs. We could always use more towels, even if I ended up cutting them into rags. Boxes 2 and 3 were full of paperbacks, romances, and some thrillers that absolutely reeked of mildew. Junk and more junk in the next few boxes, piles of papers and bills. Then I discovered another box of books, hardcovers with pretty bindings in shades of soft green and robin's egg blue. Surprisingly, they didn't smell like mildew. There were what appeared to be journals in the batch, too, with soft brown leather covers. I grabbed a stack and carried them inside, thinking they would be perfect for the built-in bookshelves in the family room. I was organizing a second stack of books on the shelves when a loud banging at the front door caused me to jump. Assuming it was the exterminator, I swung open the door but was shocked to see Ben and Sam. "Didn't you hear us?" I'm sorry I came as quickly as I could, I said, feeling defensive. We were locked in that damn basement. Had to go out through the bulkhead, he said, angrily. You didn't hear us banging on the basement door and yelling? I was in the garage, I started, but I'm sure I would have heard you. Why the hell was that door locked? Ben demanded. I have no idea, I replied, turning towards the back hall to look for myself. Sure enough, the deadbolt was turned and the chain lock in place. I didn't lock it, I insisted. Ben ran a hand through his hair. All right, fine. No harm done, but I'd appreciate if you stuck around inside while we were working just to be sure it doesn't happen again. Of course, I replied. I'm really sorry. Maybe we should go up and check on Chris, Sam suggested, looking concerned. Ben gave a stiff nod and the two of them turned to go. You were right, Dad, I heard Sam say as they climbed the stairs. This place is really fucking creepy. Chapter 24. I sat at one end of the kitchen island facing the basement door and attempted to read my book, not daring to go back out to finish the job in the garage. Could an old deadbolt slip into place by itself? Sure, maybe that could happen. But a chain lock accidentally sliding into place? No. The house was as haunted as the day was long. There was simply no denying it, though I feared Tom would insist it was all just weird coincidences and my paranoia unless he experienced that strangeness for himself. I reread the same paragraph over and over again, jumping at every noise made by the electricians. Eventually, the exterminator, a towering, kind-faced man named Dell, arrived. He set off to ferret out whatever the hell was scratching and growling in our attic, and I all but collapsed back onto my stool at the island. I didn't realize that I'd dozed off until my phone buzzed on the counter, startling me awake. I scooped it up, hoping to find a message from Angela. May, book club tonight, my house at 7. You have to come. I was immediately overcome with exhaustion as I read Kat's text. You got a dog here? A voice boomed behind me, and I damn near jumped out of my skin. Dell stood in the archway between the foyer and kitchen. Didn't mean to scare ya. That's okay, but no, we don't have a dog. He adjusted his baseball cap. Must have been the people who lived here before you. Why? Something's been clawing up your attic floor. Really? My husband didn't mention any marks, just the scratching. They're there all the same. Couldn't find any other sign of critters, though. No scat, no fur. Have you seen anything up there? Maybe when you're straightening up? No. Maybe the cleaning lady cleared it out. We don't have a cleaning lady. Well, then, I'm stumped. We'd know if it was raccoons. Rats, too. They all leave their calling cards. Rats? I'll set some traps and we'll see what we see. Could be squirrels, you never know. But my husband heard a growl. Sure, he said, his voice tinged with skepticism. At any rate, you best keep that attic door closed. If those marks aren't from the last owner's dog and your husband really did hear growling, then you don't want an animal with claws big enough to cause that mess finding its way down to your living area. My phone buzzed. Another text message from Kat, and I glanced down. Come a little early, okay? We can catch up before everyone gets here. Dell promised to return the following week to check his traps, assuring me that if anything happened in the meantime, he'd pop right over to sort it out. Eventually, Ben and his team wrapped up their work for the day, and I was left alone in the house. I didn't have the energy or will to ride my bike into town, but I texted Tom and he promised he'd be home by 5 at the latest, sooner if he could. That left me with 2 hours to fill in a house that officially scared the hell out of me. Maybe it was just the ghost of Olive Talbot causing mischief, but the thought that a dead woman wanted to fright everyone in my home and was scratching at my attic floor didn't make me feel any better about it. I was jumping at every little noise, so I decided to put those old beach chairs to use. It was unseasonably chilly for the end of September. I grabbed a fleece blanket and hunkered down at a far corner of the patio. Grass sprouted between the old moss-covered bricks in a very New England sort of way. A soft breeze moved through the surrounding trees, and I had a moment of pure appreciation for the place before the image of Olive Talbot freezing to death in that very spot crowded my thoughts. I opened my book, determined to escape into a cozy mystery. And then the screaming began. 2 shrill bursts of terror emanated from next door. I peered through the wide band of trees that separated our properties and watched Beretta Reed stumble out to the center of her backyard. I stood and took a few steps forward, intending to rush over to offer help, when Grill Reed's booming voice stopped me in my tracks. God damn it, Beretta, get back inside. I saw it right there in the kitchen. It was right behind me, Beretta shrieked, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as she shifted back and forth from foot to foot. Don't be ridiculous, he growled, crossing the lawn in long strides. Beretta backed away so quickly that she almost tripped. Arms held out defensively, she pleaded, Grill, please, you said yourself yesterday that things feel off again, and lower your voice before someone hears you. Beretta wrapped her arms around herself again and began to cry. I did exactly what they told me to do. I thought that was the end of it. Grill took several slow steps towards her. I told you not to trust those women and their sacrilegious bullshit. But it worked, Beretta pleaded. If it worked so well, then why are you standing in the middle of the yard carrying on like this? Beretta went still and stared at the ground like a child berated by her domineering parent. She said something else, but the wind carried it away. Enraged, Grill boomed, I told you that if you just ignore it, it will stop. He reached out and grabbed his wife's upper arm, pulling her back into their house without another word. Uh-oh. Looks like May isn't the only one dealing with a haunting. I'll see you here next week for our next installment. And if you'd like, you can head over to Patreon, where for the $4 a month and above level, you can access all of these chapters without my intro and outro chatter, as well as the Dead Time podcast that I do with Kristen Anderson, which is really fun. We just pick a random ghost hunting reality TV show and recap it and chit-chat about how wonderful that genre is. All right, I'll see you back here next week.